I don't know anything about this loan situation. I'm trying to read about it. I'm trying to research it. There feels like a lot of unknowns here, a lot of stuff that just isn't making sense to me, or it seems like anyone. And I think the big thing is, what do these possible changes, like, are they in stone? Are they not? And what do they mean for you guys as future PAs? We are getting started. So we have Kristen here, and Kaitlin will be joining in just a minute. They are with Millionaires in Medicine. I'll let them tell you all about that. We've done a lot of webinars together over the years, Kristen. And this was one that I actually reached out specifically and was like, hey, I don't know anything about this loan situation. I'm trying to read about it. I'm trying to research it. There feels like a lot of unknowns here, a lot of stuff that just isn't making sense to me, or it seems like anyone. And I think the big thing is, what do these possible changes, like, are they in stone? Are they not? And what do they mean for you guys as future PAs? Like, are these things that are going to affect you now, later? Do you need to change what you're doing? So we're going to get the rundown from the experts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm curious to hear too, just so we can kind of tailor the conversation. What phase of your educational journey are you in? If you can just share that in the chat, I think it would be helpful to know, like, are we mostly early undergrad, later undergrad, accepted to PA school, applying, even having started already? Where are we at in the process here? So I'm seeing accepted for May.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'm also in Augusta.
Yeah, there we go. Grad school funding, financing, scholarships. Okay.
Some 2027 applications.
Okay. Applying this cycle, upcoming interviews. Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Great.
That's very helpful to know kind of where everyone is in the process. Savanna, are you okay if we kind of dive into some of the goods here?
Yes, I think we're trying to get Kaitlin in, but you are good.
Okay, I will kind of kick us off, and then my colleague Kaitlin will come on and join us. So I'm Kristen Burton. I'm the founder of Millionaires in Medicine. I'm a PA myself. I've spent the last decade, which is crazy, working in cardiology, inpatient cardiology, and critical care medicine. I'm also the founder of Millionaires in Medicine, and the whole point of our platform, is to help educate medical professionals, but specifically PAs, NPs, and pharmacists on all things personal finance. As you guys may have noticed, as future PAs, we tend to get kind of left out of the conversation when it comes to all stuff money. Most of the conversation around student loan debt or around investing actually is specifically written for physicians who, as you guys know, have a different training process, different student loan burden, different income trajectory, all of those things. And so the purpose of our company is to make that accessible and specific to us. Now, my colleague who's joining us, Kaitlin Hile, she actually has completed specialty training in federal student loan strategy. So she'll really kind of get into the nitty gritty of the newest income-driven repayment plan, some of the new legislative actions, and we'll talk through that. Before we get to that, it sounds like we have a lot of like big picture things to talk about, as a lot of people are applying right now. Hello, Kaitlin, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we were just kind of starting out in the chat. There's a lot of folks that are actually applying and interviewing right now.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. So if it's okay with you, I was going to talk through some of the things to think about when thinking big picture loan strategy, and then like even to think about as you're selecting a program. And then we can maybe dive into some of your content on legislative updates, income-driven repayment plan updates, and those kind of things. Does that work?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So big picture, you should really be thinking about how you're going to tackle your student loan debt now before you take out the student loan debt. I did not do that. I blindly signed up for loans. I didn't know anything about anything. And it wasn't until after I was completely done and I had all my student loan debt that I said, oh, I'm going to have to figure out something to do with this. So please be smarter than I was and start thinking in advance now, what does the student loan situation look like for me on the back end? Now, there's only a few things you can do with student loans when you're done. You can pay them off on a standard time horizon, that's 10 years. You can pay them off in an accelerated time horizon, that's less than 10 years, right? For some people, 7, 5, whatever, something even shorter than that. There's public service loan forgiveness or other loan forgiveness programs, but PSLF, public service loan forgiveness, is the most common. Or there's something called taxable loan forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness is when you have a qualifying employer, nonprofit, government agency that you make 120 payments while working full-time for them. Your loans are forgiven and they're forgiven tax-free. So that's about 10 years, right? The taxable loan forgiveness path is when you pick an income-driven repayment plan, but you don't have a qualifying employer. You have just any random private practice employer. You make that payment for 20 to 25 years. The remaining amount is forgiven, and it's forgiven and taxed as though you earned the money as ordinary income. Okay, those are really the 4 things you can do. So right off the gate, if you are sitting there in your pre-PA and you're like, I have been an MA and a dermatology practice for years. I love dermatology. It's exactly what I want to do. Well, then you ought to be awfully careful about something called your debt to income ratio, which we can talk about in a second, because there are not a lot of qualifying employers for public service loan forgiveness in the dermatology space. That's a field that's dominated by private practice and private equity. And so you're probably not going to be doing public service loan forgiveness. Taxable loan forgiveness is often one of the most expensive approaches to take to student loan debt. So now you're stuck with either making a standard repayment or paying it off quickly. This is why it's really important as you're thinking about the program you might want to attend. You might think you know what specialty you like. You'll probably change your mind as you rotate and you learn and you grow. So plan to have a debt to income ratio as close to 1 as you can. Anyone, drop it in the chat if you've heard of debt to income ratio before or if you knew about that. Well, I'll keep going, but a debt to income ratio basically says, hey, my total student loan debt compared to my total first year salary.
And that's going to include federal and private student loan debt when you're thinking about debt to income ratio.
Yes, it's all student loan debt. The goal is for you to not have student loan debt that exceeds that first year salary. That's hard to pull off as a PA, but it's possible and you should work to get as close as you can. I didn't say this explicitly, but Kaitlin's actually a clinical pharmacy specialist. And so she's familiar with the process of going to undergrad and graduate school and all of those things. So Kaitlin, what would you say if someone said, I really would like to go to XYZ graduate school because they have an excellent program. They're ranked nationally like top 5, top 3, but it's 2x the cost of XYZ other program near me that maybe doesn't have quite the same reputation. What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's a tough decision to make in general, but I do think you really need to think about what is the long-term play going to be for yourself and how much better is that school really? Is it just that they have maybe a little bit of a stronger reputation, but you'll still be a very competitive job applicant at the other alternative program that's half the price? You really have to weigh like how much of a difference is there really? And then I would think about like, well, is one program able to give me a scholarship? Either that's specific to that institution or have I applied for external scholarships that might be able to help offset that cost difference? But I do think you have to really think about what am I actually signing up for in terms of the cost. And I know it's tough to work during PA school and some programs won't allow you to do so at all. And so that is a barrier also. But I would be hesitant to sign up for a program knowing that my debt to income ratio is going to be 2 or 3 to 1, because you're really limiting yourself at that point to most likely needing to find a PSLF qualifying employer on the back end.
I'm going to give my real deal, spill the tea answer. I think that it's probably 8 times out of 10, it's not worth it. If you're going to pursue a residency or fellowship, it matters a little bit more where you went to school, but just a little bit more. If you're not going to do anything, like if you're going to go to PA school and you're going to graduate and then you're going to go and get a clinical job, no one cares where you went to school. They care if you're a good clinician. And you don't learn how to be a good clinician in school, no offense. You learn it on rotations and you learn it like practicing medicine. And so if you want to get a clinical position, it won't matter. It's not going to make you a better job candidate. I do think it matters a little bit if you're saying like, hey, I want to get into this really competitive, very small residency or fellowship program that's harder to get into. You know, maybe it's like a small NICU spot or something. There's 15 people. In that instance, you might have a leg up by going to a school with a very strong reputation, but I agree completely. You need to weigh the cost, because if you have a debt to income ratio of 2-to-1, 3-to-1, as Kaitlin said, you cannot afford the payment on your take-home pay. You just cannot. And so you're going to end up having to go get a qualifying position for public service loan forgiveness, even if it's not the job you wanted, or you're going to have to do taxable loan forgiveness because you won't be able to afford anything different, which feels kind of crappy after all those years of hard work and being like, yes, I finally graduated, I finally got the job, and now I'm stuck feeling like I have to take a job that's maybe not my favorite because of my loans.
Yeah, and you guys are really in a position of power right now where you get to make this decision and be well informed in the decision-making process. We work with tons of people on the back end that already have the debt and they're already kind of like, oh, now I'm stuck. Where do I go from here? But you guys are in this position where like the world is your oyster and you can take this information and make really good decisions that we all wish we could go back and do better.
Yeah. Think long and hard. I know it's hard to get in. And so I get it. For a lot of you guys, you're like, I just need to get in. Who cares how much it costs? Like, where do I sign? Right. I get that. I've sat there too. But like, there is a life past the program too. And I know it's hard where you're sitting now to see that. But at some point you will graduate and you will be a PA and you will be in practice. And even though the student loan payment feels like not real now, it's going to hit hard when it hits.
And it'll feel very real then.
Yes. Yes. Sure. All right, Kaitlin, before we talk about the Department of Ed and professional degree status, let's talk about the SAVE plan, new income-driven plans, and what that looks like.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll start by just saying that income-driven repayment plans, that's an umbrella term. A lot of people will tell me, I'm on the IDR plan. I'm like, well, there's like 5. So which one are you on? So remember, that applies to all of them. Now, the SAVE plan is probably what you guys have heard the most about. It's been in the headlines a lot. A lot of folks have been on it. It's going to cease to exist. So go ahead and just eliminate that mentally as an option for you moving forward. If you're taking out any federal student loan after July 1st of this year, which most of you guys are probably going to check that box, right? Your only option for an income-driven repayment plan will be the repayment assistance plan. Now, if you haven't heard of that, that's because it's brand new and it's not officially out yet. It's going to be available this summer. That plan is a little bit different than our other income-driven repayment plans, but there's a lot of similarities and there's some advantages to it. It is going to be calculated based off of your adjusted gross income, which I'll define that in just a second for you. But it's based off of your AGI or adjusted gross income. And with the RAP plan, they take a percentage of your AGI, and that's kind of a sliding scale percentage based off of how high your AGI is. Now, for anyone with an AGI over 100,000, which is the vast majority of healthcare professionals, it's 10% of your AGI. But if you're somebody doing like a residency or something like that, you would get to take advantage of a lower percentage for that time frame.
I think that's helpful to understand. Like, so we're basically saying, hey, if you heard about the SAVE plan, it's an income-driven repayment plan. For most people, it was like the lowest student loan payment they could have with federal student loans. Okay, keep in mind, we're talking about federal student loans only for this. And now that's gone. And now RAP is the new income-driven repayment plan that will be active this summer. And so for most of you guys, that's what you're going to be looking at. Now you're probably thinking like, why does it matter how it's calculated? It matters because when you're done with your program, you can pull some strings, so to speak, and adjust your payment. There's quite a bit of strategy to this, but you can use certain tactics like how and when you recertify your income, as well as artificially do things to lower your AGI or your adjusted gross income to make that student loan payment lower. Now that helps some folks a lot, especially folks doing public service loan forgiveness. Because remember, anything that they don't pay is forgiven tax-free. So for them, it's amazing. If you're doing taxable loan forgiveness, then there's a downside, right? Anything that's left at the end, you get a tax bill on. So these are strategies that are more helpful for those in the public service loan forgiveness category. And I did see somebody saying, hey, are employers forthcoming about like being a PSLF eligible position? You won't see that in a job posting, but it is public record. Kaitlin, do you remember the URL of the tool you can use to search?
Yeah, I'll pull it up for you. I'll put it in the chat for you all. The Federal Student Aid website actually has a really nice employer search tool. I'll throw it in here for you, but you can search any employer to confirm yourself that they are PSLF eligible. You will need their EIN, which is just like their tax number. And if you just Google like Indiana University EIN, it'll come right up to search and confirm eligibility.
Yeah, this is easy to do, guys. In medicine, most large hospital systems are a non-for-profit status. Any non-for-profit or government entity is going to qualify. And so a lot of large hospital system jobs, which are very common, will be your qualifying position, where like private practice. So let's say you go and work for a GI clinic that's owned by a couple of docs. That is not going to end up being a qualifying position for you. You can use this tool to look it up. People are like intimidated, I think, by an EIN. I don't know why. It's the business version of a social security number. It's also like just public record instead of being secret like your social. So it's easy to find out. If you've ever been paid by the employer, that information's on your pay stub. So there's easy ways to find it and confirm that your employer is PSLF eligible. But this is an important thing to think about when you go to apply for jobs. If you're smart and you play your cards right and your debt to income ratio is close to 1, you don't have to concern yourself with it so much because the number won't be a big change for you. What we like to look at when we're talking to medical professionals at practice is the total cost of student loan repayment. And for people with a debt to income ratio like close to 1, you'll see if they do a standard plan, an accelerated plan, taxable loan forgiveness, PSLF, the numbers, like there's not a huge spread in total cost. But when you see people with, $300,000 in student loan debt or 400,000 or more, the difference between them doing public service loan forgiveness and like taxable loan forgiveness, for example, it could be $400,000. It could be $500,000. We had a gentleman lately that it was $1 million decision whether or not he took a job with a qualifying employer because of his debt to income ratio. And so if you don't want to be making decisions based solely on that, and you want it to be the icing on the cake, when you graduate and you go on your job hunt, make sure that you're really intentional with your choices now.
I see a question in the chat. Is PSLF restricted to primary care or can specialties qualify? It actually is not based on specialty whatsoever. It's solely based on the tax status of your employer. So you just need to have a non-for-profit or a government employer. So like Kristen said, most like academic medical centers, most large hospital systems are PSLF qualifying because they're non-for-profit. Now, of course, you're going to do your due diligence and double check that, but you can work in just about any specialty and find a PSLF qualifying employer. Some specialties will be easier than others, right? Yeah. Kristen mentioned dermatology is like always the poster child of harder to find, yet doable if you really wanted to. Yeah. But yeah, any specialty, it's more so about your employer. And just to clarify like what PSLF is, you would need to work for that qualifying employer and make a qualifying payment for 120 months, so 10 years. And you need to be working full-time at that employer during that time. And then your remaining student loan balance for federal student loans would be forgiven tax-free. So that's like the huge deal for PSLF. Taxable loan forgiveness, like Kristen said, you would be on an income-driven repayment plan. So for you all, most likely the RAP plan. For actually 30 years on the RAP plan, you're making that payment. And then your remaining balance would be forgiven, but it's treated as ordinary income. So you might be facing a hefty tax bill.
See, that ruins what I've been saying for years because I've always said for taxable loan forgiveness, it reminds me of a Law and Order episode of like, you 25 to life for your student loans.
Now it's
30 years. And that's like not catchy. That's not a real sentence in our criminal justice system. Bummer. But, in all seriousness, guys, just remember PSLF isn't even exclusive to medicine. Like it's teachers, it's any profession. If you have the nonprofit or government employer and you have federal student loans, a lot of medical professionals take advantage, but like it's not even made for us. You might be thinking of something like National Health Service Corps' repayment program. Some of those other programs can be dependent on you being in an underserved area, and a lot of that is primary care driven. So there are other ways to have forgiveness programs or repayment programs, and they can be incredibly valuable. I'll actually mention now, if anyone is able to get a National Health Service Corps scholarship on the front end, you will crush later financially. So there's lots of options for that. Someone I see in the chat just mentioned that, like, what's our opinion about that? It can be a great modality. You have to do the math. All of this stuff, it is literally math. First off, you all are applying right now, so you shouldn't leave tonight. Like, you shouldn't go to bed tonight without having added up what your total cost will be of every program you're applying to. So you need to know the tuition. You need to know what the monthly expenses are going to be in the area. You need to add all that up and go, this is my cost of my program. That's the only way you can know your debt to income ratio, right, in advance. And then once you have that number, you can start thinking through, okay, am I even interested in primary care? And if I am, would one of those repayment programs be good? Sometimes those jobs pay less. But it's just math. There's a break-even point. You know what I mean? You can just calculate, okay, if they pay off X dollars of my student loan debt, then I make $10,000 less a year. How does that add up in the long term? When do I break even on having that lower paying job, but then getting ahead on the student loan side? And so it is a simple numeric decision if all you care about is the money piece. But then there is the professional piece of, do I want to work in an underserved community in primary care for a few years? Because that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and I'm glad, Kristen, that you mentioned when you're comparing the cost of programs to think about what your monthly expenses will be in that area. Looking at a program in rural Kentucky and a program in New York City, like, your rent will be dramatically different, right? And you're probably going to be needing to utilize loans to help cover your housing costs.
Yeah.
So that's another important piece of the puzzle to be thinking about.
Yeah, I don't know what y'all are using to organize your application process. I'm old, so I use Excel, and like, this just needs to be a column, okay? Like, you just need to have that plugged in. This is my total cost of program. And then you need to ask yourself, real deal, if I go to school that shall not be named, that is $300,000 for a PA program, am I in fact going to earn $300,000 upon graduation to compensate for that? Well, if the answer is no, the answer is no. And if you're not sure, Merit Health, MARIT, is a great resource. Not paid to say this, but they have really good salary data for PAs, granular data that you can filter by years of experience and location. So you can look and see, like, okay, as a new grad, what could I genuinely expect to earn? That will be so helpful when you're looking at your column and you're looking at what you would anticipate to earn, because the odds are what you would anticipate to earn is probably the same across the board. So there's your debt to income ratio for each school right there built into your Excel spreadsheet.
I like it, using those Excel equations to make it nice and efficient for you.
I don't think anyone uses Excel anymore, but there's so many cool apps and things now. I'm just dating myself. But Kaitlin, I know we probably have people with questions about the Department of Ed classification of specifically PAs and NPs as a non-professional graduate program. So let's talk about what that means. This is going to be really interesting for folks like moving into this space.
Yeah, so the part of the big beautiful bill that was signed into law in July of 2025 included some limits on future borrowing, both annual limits and aggregate lifetime limits. For graduate loan limits, the annual limit is going to be $20,500 with an aggregate of $100,000. For professional loan limits, the annual cap is $50,000 with an aggregate of $200,000. So, Kristen, do you want to fill in everybody on what the current status is for PAs?
Yeah, so this matters a lot. For context, just big picture, federal student loans are kind of better than private.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. You have more options. You have things like income-driven repayment plans. You have public service loan forgiveness. You have taxable loan forgiveness. You have all this other stuff, right? A lot of times private student loans don't have those options. It's like, pay us on time or else. Okay, there's not a lot of other stuff going on. Some have like hardship options, but not a lot. And so the limit on federal student loans will make it really tricky for people to borrow, to go to PA school, especially if you don't have good credit or don't have access to a cosigner, because that can make it harder to get into a private student loan. Now, the average PA already, just from graduate school, carries a little over $100,000 in student loan debt, but also has undergraduate debt too. And the last I looked, the average was around like $30,000. And so that's already above that aggregate limit for a non-professional graduate degree. So you're like, problem, right? There's legislature that's coming out saying, hey, we'd like PA programs to be reclassified as a professional degree so that our cap would be up at that 200,000 level. Programs that are already like that, dentistry, podiatry, pharmacy, law, and like many of those professions actually have very similar credit hour requirements to PA programs anyways, and have similar earning potential on the back end. It's a little frustrating that we were excluded, but they're attempting to get that corrected. I'm not going to talk politics, but you can see why they did this, right? Like, Kaitlin, you probably know the number. Give me like an estimate-ish, like in December, November. How many people were approved for public service loan forgiveness in this country?
Oh, I was actually just looking at this. It was about 9,000, I think 400 had PSLF applications approved in the month of September.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that tells you like, how much do you think all those people had forgiven? Probably like a decent chunk of change, right? So this is the expense to the United States government of forgiving all the student loan debt is massive. And so in an attempt to limit the expense, this bill was passed. You can see why, but you can also see why it would make it very tricky for a lot of people to gain access to becoming a PA with this setup. So it's an interesting situation. I'm sure as you guys are trying to become PAs, you've probably been tracking the AMA's legislative campaign against the expansion of scope of practice for PAs. And so this comes at a very unique time where we have already seen a physician shortage. We don't see any data that that's improving. We simultaneously see physician legislative action to try to contain the scope of PAs, and also potentially a reduction in people's ability to become a PA for financial reasons. So lots of layers here that will make the job landscape interesting, the healthcare landscape interesting, our ability to provide adequate patient care, patient access interesting. I don't have a magic 8-ball or know what will come of this, but that is the situation. And so if that doesn't change, if we remain classified as a non-professional degree, there will be that aggregate cap, which means anything above that's going to have to be private student loan debt. Be very cautious. Kaitlin, you can probably mention a couple of the downsides of private student loan debt in terms of like they are not discharged and things like that. That might be helpful context too for people who are thinking about taking them out.
Yeah. So historically, private student loans have had higher interest rates. So that's inevitably a downside. Oftentimes, if you don't have a strong credit score, which most folks don't at that age, right? They either have no credit or maybe hadn't made the best decisions early on. Or if you don't have access to a cosigner, they may just choose not to lend to you at all. So you may not be able to get a private student loan, or you'll get one that has an absurd interest rate and some predatory implications. So those are some downsides there. Beyond that, you also lose all of the financial hardship, income-driven repayment options. There's no forbearance that you could do if something, were to occur. If you were to be permanently disabled or totally and completely disabled, or you were to die, your federal student loans would be discharged. So your family wouldn't be left with having to make your federal student loan payments. Private student loans aren't necessarily treated that way. It depends on the lender, how they navigate that. But you could be, if you were to pass away suddenly, heaven forbid, your family members could be left with, how are we going to pay off all of this private student loan debt when now we don't even have the PA income coming in, right? So those are some of the reasons private student loans, it's not that they're the wrong answer. It's just that they're less advantageous and you need to be really careful with the loan terms and knowing what you're actually signing up for.
Yeah, be very careful. I mean, think about it. Like you go out and have your mom co-sign that loan because you can't get the loan on your own. You get in a car accident and now your poor mom is trying to make like a $1,500 a month, $1,700 a month payment that doesn't have an extra $100,000 a year coming in to do it. It's tricky. So if that's you, make sure you have adequate term life insurance. It's like $20 a month if you're young without comorbidities, and it will solve that problem. Not the disability problem, but the problem of death and loans that don't discharge. And that way, if you have any kind of cosigner on your loan, you can make them the beneficiary of your life insurance policy. Problem solved, right? If something were to happen to you, you would in fact be able to have that money go to them tax-free. They could pay the remaining balance and not have that burden. So these are just things to think about if you're going down the private student loan avenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do have to say, like, with all of this legislative changes and how that would have a dramatic impact on the profession for PAs, this is why your professional organizations are so valuable. AAPA has been been lobbying hard to get this status changed for PAs. And I think they also brought it to the attention of most PAs that maybe didn't know that this was happening. And so just a little plug to stay connected with your national organizations because they do a lot of service on your behalf.
Yeah. And I know you guys have like so much on your mind right now with thinking about getting into PA school. That's probably where it begins and ends for you guys. But like you do have to really think about this type of stuff as well and what the downstream ramifications are for the profession that you're signing up for a long time, right? Like we hope we don't spend $100,000 in multiple years in the suck studying just to come out on the other side and then be not a PA for very long. So you're hopefully going to do this a while. And as a result, you want to make sure you're tracking all of these things and you're aware of the professional like roadblocks and things that could be in your path.
I see a good question here in the chat. Can you touch on paying off loans and also investing? Is it good to keep investing at a lower rate? Kristen, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I'll let you get started.
Yeah, you have to invest from the very first paycheck you ever get. And if you don't, you're making a grave mistake. I don't have anything else to say about that. That's just the math. That's the cold hard truth that any PA that comes out of a program, you are behind from an investing standpoint. And I say that in love because I was you and I was behind too. You missed all of your undergrad years. If you did gap years, if you were getting healthcare hours, whatever, you missed that time. You missed the time you were in graduate school. By the time you're done with all of that stuff, you finally get credentialed, you finally get licensed, you're way, way, way behind. Your colleagues could have been investing for 5-7 years already. And so you have to take that incredibly seriously. We hear all the time, like PAs will come out and they'll be like, well, I'm only 27. And so I actually feel like I'm doing pretty well because I'm thinking about this stuff kind of early. It's like, no, you're thinking about this stuff kind of late. As a matter of fact, your window of investing a relatively small amount every month and having financial independence end up okay on the back end, that window already closed. Anything less than really 20% of your income is going to be insufficient. And the longer you wait, the higher that percentage goes. And so I get it. Like for most of us, the student loan debt is an emotional burden. It's something that we think about often. And it's like number one on our priority list. I would actually suggest that you need to flip that. Your investing needs to be number one on your priority list. Student loans need to be number two. And you need to view those through the context of how do I solve this problem so I can get onto investing?
Yeah, I agree. I think people feel the pain of making that student loan payment every month. They're logging in every month to make that payment and they see that loan balance and it gives you the chest pain every single time you see it. But what you're not seeing is like how far you are behind from an investing standpoint or what year you would be able to retire with your current investing habits. Probably not going to be the answer you want to see, right? Most people aren't excited to see, oh, you might be able to retire at 75. So that really should be at the forefront of your mind. The nice thing is if you get started investing at that first paycheck, like Kristen said, your income, you've never earned that much in your life, right? And so if you just start investing minimum 20%, day one, you'll never know any different. Like your take-home pay will still feel huge compared to what you're used to as a student, which is probably nothing. So if you can build your lifestyle around that reduced take-home pay, that includes investing in student loan payments, if you do that from day one, you're going to be in a much better spot than the folks that start adjusting their lifestyle at the beginning of starting their career and then have to make adjustments on the back end when they realize they're behind on student loan strategy, they're behind on investing, and it's a big game of catch up at that time.
Yeah. I see Michael's comment. If I start in August, when should I apply for federal loans? And I'm praying I get into the PA program that starts in May. I'm on the wait list. So actually, you want to do your FAFSA the fall before you start. Typically, FAFSA opens in October. And what you want to do is actually fill that out. So let's say you wanted to start August 2026. You would want to be doing the FAFSA fall of 2025. That is going to be as helpful as possible. And you do want to generally do FAFSA as soon as available. Kaitlin, did you have anything to add there?
No, I think that's it. The key is to make sure you get that FAFSA done. And some people will put that off. So that's definitely a top priority if you're thinking about taking out federal student loans.
And Michael, I see your note that you're on the wait list. I also hope you get in. And I just want to encourage you today her yesterday. I was sitting next to a gal that I actually graduated PA school with 10 years ago. And she's a beast. Like, she's an excellent PA, one of the strongest ones I know. And she mentioned, which I had totally forgotten, oh yeah, I was waitlisted for our PA program. And I thought I wasn't going to get in. And I thought I was going to do a gap year because I just didn't have high hopes. And then I was able to get a spot. And yeah, she graduated like top of our class. And 10 years later, she's an excellent PA. So I would just encourage you, stay tuned. Good things will happen.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, if I graduate undergrad debt-free, does that mean I qualify for a $100,000 loan, or is it $20,500 loan times a 2-year program?
Yeah, you would still have to follow the annual limits. So really the aggregate comes into play for the longer programs or those who have undergraduate debt as well.
Yes. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Like, yeah, that's per year. But then even if you're following the per year rule, at the end of all of it, there's that aggregate cap on the end. Any other questions, guys? We've gotten some really good questions in the chat. Okay. Well, I hope this has been like a helpful recap, at least what all of the different student loan types that you can take in terms of approaches overall, thinking through making selections on the front end, and then some considerations for what's changed from a legislative standpoint.
I'll jump back in. This was fantastic, guys. And that's what I was going to ask. Like, where do we go next? Where do we find, the next step for everybody? And I know that this can be really complicated, touching on a lot of what y'all talked about. We got no financial education the whole time I grew up. Like, before PA school, in regular school, in PA school, I think they had a bank come talk to us like the last 2 weeks of school. So after we all had loans, and then we were, I don't know what.
It was done.
And they're basically like, yeah, like, we're a bank. You can use us. We brought you lunch. That was the extent of it. And Kristen and I have talked. I also love personal finance. I got the White Coat Investor book, and there's so many other great books out there and resources now. That was a long, long time ago. But I do think it's worth your time to, and I know it can be complicated and confusing, but like, put in the time to try to understand and learn this stuff a little bit. It's something that can change, like, make a big difference for you. I was just texting Kaitlin, who y'all seen in the chat, because she was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, this is so true. We didn't even know about this. And I was telling her how even when I got out of PA school, I did start investing right away. And my parents are teachers. They both have pensions. So like, they never really had to do that or had to set up their own retirements on my own there. So I did start investing, but I didn't know that you had to actually allot it to anything. So my investments just sat in an account for 3 years, not doing anything, not gaining money, like just sitting there. And so, like you were saying, having some guidance, having a mentor, having someone to look at things with you very early, I think is so, so valuable. I don't like to think about, where that money would be now.
I know. Yeah.
Don't think
too hard on that.
I learned my mistake. That was done. At least I was saving it. But, stuff like that like we just don't even know about.
We see that all the time. It's like,
sure.
It's tough. Those are expensive mistakes, but we spend so much time learning medicine. Most of us don't really put a lot of time or effort into solving this particular problem until it becomes a really painful problem. And so anyone who's like, hey, I'm going to not let that be me. I'm going to, really think about this intentionally even before my program starts, and then hit the ground running from day one, you'll be light years ahead.
Yeah. And I think like all of y'all here are already taking steps that I didn't take, that a lot of us didn't take, just having an interest in it. So feel free to reach out to me, check out the resources at Millionaires in Medicine, go back and watch some of our old webinars as well. They're all on YouTube. We'll probably do more in the future too. So if there's something that would be helpful or needs more clarification, please let us know.
Thank you, Savanna, for having us. We love coming to talk to your people. They always have great questions, which we love.
Yes, they do. All right, y'all have a great night.
Have a good one.
Thanks.